Oftentimes I will come across something that I didn't know about, but it did exist in ye olde days. I just wasn't aware that it existed the same time that I did in those youthful days. So I found such a thing, and I'll get quick and into it. In England, there was more of an idea to train your children, potentially, to become wargamers than there is in the United States. So I found these. This is the back cover of what are known as the Usborne Battlegame books. This shows the three games that I'm not holding here. The Wild West is actually really easy to find, but it wasn't really pertinent to my interests. I kind of live there. The Knights at War, I'll show you shortly. This World War II one is by far the most popular and costs the most, which is why I don't have it in my hands today. These books are essentially wargaming books for kids. They were created in England in 1974 and 1975. Let me show you how it goes. This being one of the original ones, I'm going to walk you first through the 1990s reprint. This is a 1990 reprint of the Knights at War book. Notice the more late 80s, early 90s style layout to the book. Has the original art. This book has good old-fashioned artwork from the old days of education. I really like that. And I bring up the education point because since these are war games for kids, guess what they also do? They're educational. This tells you about the days before knights existed, like Roman cavalry, Frankish cavalry, Normans fighting at Battle of Hastings. The Bayeux Tapestry was the record. Battle of Hastings was the battle. It then goes into the history of how the Crusades started and has some interesting information on castles. This is pretty much an educational section, how the knights dress and what their armor was composed of. And then, of course, has a little note on heraldry. You can teach your kids how to read a knight's crest. How awesome is that? There's a little section on the downfall of the knights and how the end of the Middle Ages and knightly warfare came to be about. This is where things get different. They're called Battlegame books, and these ones that are saddle stitched, they're just paperback essentially. They're that way for a reason. This is a pull-out section. You're going to see a couple of maps and game pieces here. You're supposed to actually pull out the center of the board, put it on card, slice it up or cut it up, and then make tokens that you could play with out of that. There's the tokens for that. Here's one half of the Battle of Arsuf map. Here's one half of the Castle at Siege map. As it says here, here's one half of the Border Raiders map. This sounds like a fun one. It's literally bandits stealing cattle and sheep. And then, this is what they're supposed to look like, but this one's the one in the center of the book, so you get to see it fully here. This is the tournament battle, where you tilt in these directions and fight against your knights like this, or they have a grand melee where people can just walk around and slack people. I think these colors are somewhat accurate. France, I know, is accurate to the colors. Spain is accurate to the colors. England is accurate to the colors. I can only assume that Flanders, Burgundy, Germany, and Scotland and Italy also have accurate colors, but I'm not one to really know this stuff. But I think it's cool. It's actually pretty cool they have this available so that, you can learn about medieval war games and medieval fighting, as a kid. If you have cool parents, they'll teach you this stuff, right? Anyway. And there's just the other half of the maps I talked about earlier. And we're going to see more of the game pieces here in a bit. The Border Raiders pieces, they have sheep and cattle, ha 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 ha. And the tournament pieces. It's really weird because you can insert the knight underneath the horse for the joust, and you keep him out in the open for melee. Funny, right? Now here's another educational section where it talks about pikemen and the guns. Once you pulled out these pages, this would be the opposite page to the section about the downfall of the knights. It has a timeline. It has some things about storing your game pieces. And then it has the rules for each of the games. Here's Arsuf. It's a one-page rule essentially. Here's the Siege. Here's Border Raiders. And there's the tournament thing. Each and every last one of them is a D6 game. Each and every last one of them is very simple. There's no worrying about it. They're simple enough, easy games you can learn to play in one night if you're an adult. You could play over the course of a week as a child until, of course, they lose attention or run off to do something else. kids being kids. But most of these are the kind of things you might make a board game out of. But they're all in a book, and they were all designed as introductory war games. Mind you, 1975. So this is definitely a product of its time to teach kids to enjoy a war game so that when they got older, they could play the more advanced war games that we had back then. Here's an educational piece on siege warfare. Talks about helmet types. I think that's it. That's the page. And then weapons of the Middle Ages, yada yada. Stuff we all know, but you know, for kids it's a cool first time to see it. The art is very nice. I like that. And of course it talks about tournaments and the various different things there. Shows the blunted lances they used. Yeah, fun stuff there. And of course it has an index. This is actually relatively rare to find. It's a copy that has all the pieces in there. Most of the times you find a copy of one of these, the pieces are missing. Now, speaking of things, this is not the rarest, but I think it's the second most rare. I showed you earlier the Galactic War book. Now, I talked about this being educational. I'm somewhat correct in that regard when it comes to Galactic War. Let me show you why. First of all, this is the original 1975 copy. I am so glad to have gotten a hold of one. And yes, it has the pieces still in there. But this is the opening to Galactic War. It has like future science fiction stuff. 1975. It predates Star Wars by 2 years, so keep that in mind. Here's educational stuff about the solar system. Educational stuff about how space generally works. Space exploration and space pioneers. By the way, they made an anime series recently about Copernicus. That was so hilarious. It really was. This thing is designed to be educational up to this point. It talks about, you know, robot probes and experiments we had before we sent astronauts into space. It has how astronauts do their thing. And this is kind of an experimental thing they did, but it's included here for whatever purpose. This is the Moose system. They included that. How a space suit works. And here's where they go half and half. They talk about the space shuttle up here. They have the old Skylab. The predecessor to the ISS was the old Skylab. Here it is. And then they have this fantasy thing about cities in the sky. That, looking at the scale of the city in there, is probably 15 miles long. We don't have anything like that. I think the ISS itself is like 200 or 300 feet long at the most. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. Not at all. In fact, the fact that we have not fully invested in mechanical technological advances compared to computer technological advances says a lot. We're willing to look at the illusion more so than the reality of things. Crazy, right? Oh well, maybe one day. Here's the time chart. Here's another thing about storing game pieces, and here are game pieces. There is a Space Pirates game. There is a Deadly Planet game. There is a double-sided page that has all the little tokens. They're just blue open paper. The printing done here isn't anything amazing. Then we have an Invasion of Earth scenario and a Galactic Warfare scenario. I believe these are supposed to have been chopped out of the book, so you get, because I've seen copies of this where you have this nasty blue thing in there. You chop those out and you get your thing. And you have more little, oh, here's the Space Pirates map. I guess you're just supposed to lay out the book. I would almost photocopy this in color and go from there. Then we have, come on guys, another section about, you know, fantastical, potential, hypothetical space voyages. It talks about the interstellar ramjet as opposed to the nuclear thing that also is a interesting thing. That nuclear-based engine was hilariously good, but the ramjet works too. Here's a Deadly Planet map for the Deadly Planet game. I guess a very recent movie in the entourage at this time period would have been Planet of the Apes on one hand and Forbidden Planet on the other. So it's kind of Forbidden Planet-like. We have Earth, these three alien races, they go out and try to deal with this deadly planet. Alien life, this is completely hypothetical. Invasion Earth. The aliens are trying to land and spawn in these ocean parts, and you have different bases and missile satellites used to fight the aliens. The far future, this is pretty much science fiction at this point. The hole in space test is a demonstration how tesseracts might work. Then you have at the very end of the book, it is the end leaf, is the Galactic War Map, which is a hex game which pretty much build your technology, and your technology versus the enemy's technology determines how easy your dice rolls are. This is what this book is like. These are the Usborne Battlegame books. I have the number 2 and number 3, with the number 3 being the original because I'm a science fiction dork and I like to have the original things of science fiction items. I don't recommend these for gaming, but as a piece of history to understand exactly how things work with, gaming in general, I will include this. Because someone out there played these games as a kid and might eventually watch my channel or go on YouTube and look about, well, did the Usborne Battlegame books actually exist, or was that a figment of my imagination? They exist. I think they're actually pretty good for the intended purpose. They're easy D6 style games. You can play them with your kids and get them used to the idea of wargaming. If you really want to go out and buy them, the cheapest one available is the Wild West. Have fun with the other ones. They're probably going to have pieces missing too. I can't really recommend them as far as that's concerned because there's a chance when you buy them they won't be complete. You have to kind of probe and ask around. This being the Usborne Battlegame books, I will leave you to do what you want to with this information. If you want to, you can teach your kids how to wargame too. Thanks for watching the video. May the dice ever roll in your favor.